Welcome to the Real Man Podcast. This is your host, Coach Bricks. And, I met this guy probably about 5-6 years ago in a mastermind group that we were in together and stuff like that. And we connected afterwards, and I didn't know much about him, because the group was pretty big. There's probably about 30 or 40 people in this group. And, we just got to talking. And we got to talking. We had a lot of similar things. He was training athletes. He was doing this and stuff. And I come to find out that after talking about 2 or 3 times, actually, I don't think he told me, I think somebody else told me, he was actually the strength coach for the New York Yankees, the 2009 team that went on to win the World Series. And I'm like, so Mariano Rivera, Alex Rodriguez, all these, oh yeah, I know those guys. And then all of a sudden, he kind of shifts out of that strength and conditioning field, and he goes into writing books and doing coaching and stuff. And all of a sudden, I start to see pictures of him with Alex Rodriguez and him supporting him and Derek Jeter. And I'm like, I knew this guy. I'm talking to this guy. I don't even know anything about this, And it's just funny as you go through life, what you learn about people as you continue to find things out, as you question, you communicate and things like that. And that's what I did, and this gentleman is very passionate about what he does. I mean, he writes children's books, which phenomenal. He wrote a book that I'm, reading right now. I'm almost finished with, with leaders and all this kind of stuff, the winning habit and all this kind of things, what it takes to be a winner. And he just continues to put this stuff out there. He's a positive influence for so many people, and I'm honored that I can have him on today. And I'm just honored to even know him because, he's a great individual, great man, does things right, and continues to do those things right in a world when, it's easy to be like, well, hey, listen, I trained the New York Yankees in 2009. I'm the man. He doesn't act like that. Like I said, I would have never even known if somebody would have mentioned something to me go looking it up and then me asking him. So he's very humble and down to earth kind of gentleman. And I appreciate this gentleman being on. And I'm not going to take any more time of introducing him because he's the man and he can fill you in a little bit more on what he does. But Coach Dana, man, how are you today? And I appreciate you being on.
I'm doing well, Coach Bricks. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
My pleasure, man. As I mentioned to everybody, I talk about something, a shift in society. And I know we talked about it a little bit about this man. I talk to real men and what's going on with men in today's society, and I want to ask you a bunch of questions and I want your feedback, your answers and stuff. So people can hear, you've been around all different kind of people. You've been at the pinnacle of sports, and what you're doing now, we were just talking off air where you got your own farm and stuff like that and doing those kind of things. So you're at both ends of the spectrum. You've been there. You've owned your own gyms. You had 4 or 5 gyms that you owned at one time. You got out of that. Now you're into coaching and you're writing children's books. So I think that's going to be valuable, what you're going to give here to us. So I'm going to get it right into it. And
cool.
I wanted to ask you, what is your definition of leader? What's your definition of a leader?
It's funny you asked me that because this morning I actually wrote something and I said, there's a lot of talk about the word leadership today. And I said, if you really want to know what leadership is, you have to add a little something to the word. And I said, the word so you remember the definition, should be leader, and you need to add of the ship. Leadership, but leader of the ship. And then you start to say, well, what does that mean? It means that every ship has to have a leader, has to have somebody to drive it. So if you want to know what leadership is, ask yourself, what does a captain of a ship do, right? Not only does he drive, or steer the ship towards a destination, but it's his job to make sure he's got the right crew, and the crew understands what's at stake, and that crew knows the expectation of the leader. And then you got other people that come on the ship. You got to protect those people. You got to make sure that they know that you have their back. So leader of the ship, leadership means that you have great responsibility over other people, and it's your duty to help them get towards their destination.
That's awesome, man. You broke that down very simple, man. That was awesome. Exactly. To make it as simple as possible, you're right on. You're right on with that leader of the ship, because that's what it's all about. And how you even brought in, say, hey, you got to bring people on and you got to protect them. I think that's what sometimes people forget. Yes, they can lead the group that they have, but when certain people come on, they don't know how to take care of that person. And I think that's
and listen, Bricks, there's another part of it too. Being the leader of the ship also says sometimes you have to ask people to get off your ship. because they don't follow the rules or they don't feel that the rules apply to them. But listen, every ship has rules. There's rules of the land, there's rules of the water, there's rules to leadership.
Yeah, no, I agree. So playing on that, what do you think today, what's lacking in leaders today?
Well, I think where do I begin? And I don't say that to say, well, as an elitist, as if I'm a great, unbelievable, best leader in the world, I could do anything. I mean, I believe that I can, and I think most people should. But I believe that we are in the kindness culture. Everyone's about love and happiness and be kind. And you know what? Sometimes somebody needs a shot. I grew up, if I was not alert, or, my dad would give me a little something on the side of the head and say, hey, wake up. And I think a lot of people need to wake up. And I see a lot of leadership gurus out there, all the big names on the books. I'm a little name on the books. But they're all about selling, right? They don't give too many craps, I don't think, about your true leadership development. They just want to sell the next book. And, when people said, hey, why'd you get into writing books? And I said, because I couldn't stand reading the fluffy, sissy books that I kept reading on leadership. Because sometimes somebody needs a kick in the ass. And I never read in those books about anybody getting one. It's all about, I was listening to something yesterday on LinkedIn. This woman is the chief people officer of a company, which is crazy because no company should have a chief people officer if they have a good leader. The leader of the ship is the chief people officer. So you can't delegate overseeing your people. If you do that, you shouldn't be a leader. But she said, well, what needs to happen in companies is people need to have more fun. And people, they should have scavenger hunts and they should do like brunches and socials. And I'm listening to this and I'm throwing up listening to it because I'm saying business is war. Business is about, if I don't get it done, my family may not eat. Business is, if I don't get it done, I may not be able to pay the mortgage on my house, or I may not be able to pay the taxes on my house. That means the government takes it. The county takes it. So, one of my clients I work with is a multi-billionaire. And I said, do you believe that business should be fun? He goes, no, I believe business is business and fun is fun. And when you cross the two, you can have some major problems.
You're right.
So what I see in leaders today is that the leadership gurus out there do a very poor job of teaching leadership because most of them have never led anything. It's like when I go speak, I tell people, listen, by the way, just so you know, I'm a coach who happens to speak, not a speaker. I just want to make that clear right from the beginning because I coach people every day. Like I don't just come and put a script together. I coach people.
Yeah.
And when you do that, that means you get up early, you go to bed late. That means you grind with them. That means when they have a problem, you answer the phone. That means when you're supposed to take the 2 weeks off between Christmas and New Year's, you don't have those 2 weeks like everybody else. It just doesn't work that way. So it's a long-winded answer, but that's what I feel.
I think it nails it.
Yeah.
It's what is lacking in society today. And I think it needs to be shifted around. It needs to be shifted back to what it was.
Yeah. Right? It starts with things like initiatives like this.
Yeah. I like the thing with your dad, smack him aside. Yeah. My dad was the same.
Yeah. Just wake up. I wasn't beat to the ground, but I was given that little wake up flick.
Oh yeah. I remember them greatly. Many of them. So let me ask you, and this could be on a national level, it doesn't have to be a local level or somebody you personally know. Who do you see as a leader?
Who do I see as a leader? It's interesting based on the times that we're in, who do I see as a leader? So I'll share this story with you. When I was in 8th grade, I got a book. And the book was called The Art of the Deal. And it was written by Donald J. Trump. And, when I see him as a leader, for his presidency, I appreciated him because of the courage that he showed and had and has, to be a success in business, as um, you know, it's tough. People say, well, his dad gave him $1 million. I said, yeah, but if I give you $100, would you turn that into 1 million? He took 1 million and turns it into 1 billion because it's the same formula. Could you do that? And not to get political, but I enjoyed a lot of what he brought to the table, in that this is what I believe and this is what I believe. And I'm using him just it's because it's a hot topic, but I do believe that when people are convicted in their beliefs, that makes them great leaders, because it's saying who's coming with me. And for one person to be that convicted and to see that many people show up and support the mission and the vision, which is all about a better America, I think that's great leadership. That's publicly, a public leader. But like I always believe that leadership starts in the house. So my parents were good leaders in that, they set a tone for me, and I followed that tone, and I knew as a young person what I stood for. And I think a lot of people don't know who they are and they don't know what they stand for. So they get swindled and swayed into a lot of different things. And years later, when you ask them, what do they stand for? They still don't know. So I always believe leadership starts in the house. So leaders, again, I shared with you the public leader, but in private, my parents were leaders that I looked up to.
That's awesome. Awesome stuff. Now, self-discipline. What does self-discipline mean to you?
Oh, self-discipline means doing the things you need to do, even when you don't want to do them. We'll all be tested, right? There's things that we should do, but we often don't do because we don't want to do them. And we always end up feeling bad about ourselves when we don't do those things. So I was told a long time ago, judge the effectiveness of an activity based on how you feel when you're done, not while you're doing it. So I know most people are not into training. It's not their thing, the majority. For me, I have to, because I know how I feel when I'm done. So self-discipline for me is showing up to do the things that you need to do in order to get an outcome that's favorable. So.
Yeah, I agree with that. Doing those things, when you don't want to do them. I tell people, they always ask me about that 3:30 when I wake up 3:30, and I was like, there's certain times I don't want to do it. Do you know what I mean? But I do it because there's certain things I got to get done before my kids get up. You know what I mean? Once they're up, I got to get them, the breakfast, got to make sure everything's ready for school and all that kind of stuff. So that's important to me. That's what I value, hanging out with them and seeing that time. So I, do those things. Do I always like it? No, there's days that I'm tired. Like last night I was on the phone till midnight, got up at 3 o'clock this morning. You know what I mean? There's days you have those, but you've been through those, you know how it is. I mean, you do it because that's what you have to do. You know what I mean? It's just what you want. That's what I want to do. Maybe I don't have to do it per se, but I want to do it because I want to spend the time with my kids. So I don't want to miss that time. Yeah.
So therefore you need to do it, and listen, I admire it when I see some of the times that you post. I'm like, man, I got to get my ass out of the bed and let's go, and that's at 5:30 in the morning, by the way. That's not, I'm saying that I may sound like I sleep till 9, I'm a 5 to 5:30 guy, but it's motivating and it's inspiring, but we need people in our lives to show the way, and then we take action.
Yeah, I agree. Now I'm going to get a little personal with this question here. What do you fear?
Myself. That's about it, honestly. I fear myself in that, sometimes I present myself with what if scenarios that will probably never happen. I present myself with thoughts of like, again, more what ifs, like what if this doesn't happen? And then you want that to happen. What if this, what if that? So that's really the only thing I fear. What if the stock market goes down, you lose money? What if, this happens and that happens, but other than that, I don't fear much, like, I mean, I'm not going to jump out of a plane. That's not my thing. I don't have a fear of heights, but I just don't think I want to jump out of a plane. But so in terms of fear, I don't have many. It's more the what ifs,
Yeah.
you
Now,
know, and
how do you get through that though? I mean, because sometimes fear can consume people. Let's be honest. I mean, it overtakes some people's lives. I know it hasn't done that with you, but how do you get through that for some people who might be struggling out there? What would you give them? What kind of advice?
yeah, I, I just say walk anyway. So, you know, every day I have fear. I've just believed that it's a part of the human condition. You have a lot of folks out there that say, overcome your fear. Well, you could overcome a fear of one thing, but then another fear tends to come at some other place. Like, in training people, I've trained kids, I've trained adults, pro athletes, I've trained seniors. And when you're 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, you get up and you walk. You have no fear, but when you're 80, you have a fear of walking. You have a fear of slipping on ice. You have a fear of breaking a hip. You have fears. So fear is a part of the human condition. So when I advise people, I say, listen, just get comfortable walking in it. As opposed to trying to cure it or even overcome it, get comfortable walking in it and you'll shed one fear for another. So get comfortable in it rather than look for solution.
Gotcha. That's awesome. Awesome advice. Awesome. Now, this is a big topic that's probably come up, and I know, you've heard of it. And it's come up over the last year or two. And it's this whole thing about toxic masculinity, that it exists in our society and that it has to be eradicated. I want to get your opinion on it, what you think about it, which I probably already know, but I want everybody to hear this. And what do you think we need to do about it?
Yeah. Well, like I said earlier, before we started talking, I said, show me your hands and I'll show you if you're a man. I think it's a complete line of bullshit. And I think nobody should believe that. Toxic masculinity. And I think it's more marketing. I think it's, it's a stance that some people have because they're trying to neutralize society. They don't like dominance of certain personalities, yet they accept dominance of other personalities. So it's a very interesting situation. So toxic masculinity, number one, I don't even know what it is. I'm assuming that it's, men that are really guys that we wouldn't even like, maybe guys that have real deep down problems that are abusive. Is that toxic masculinity? I mean, a guy being a guy, I don't think that's a problem. I think men are great. My wife says it all the time. There's jobs for men and there's jobs for women. She says, look, you see those guys over there, those construction workers? I don't see women out there doing that. You see those guys on the roof over there, tarring a roof? I don't see women up there doing that. So sometimes certain genders are better at certain things. No men complain that there's more female executive assistants and secretaries, but all of a sudden women complain that there's too many CEOs and executives. Most women I talk to say, I don't even want to be a CEO. So of course the numbers are going to be skewed. There's not a lot of female CEOs. That's because there are actually women out there that like to have children and raise them and have families and instill good values in their children. Those women are still out there today. Yeah. They're not running companies, but their husbands may be. So when you go back to toxic masculinity, I think it's made up, and I think it's a stance to bring down men, even good men. And I think it's a real problem. But I do think that men invited it. I think men they don't even know how to behave. And I work with athletes, I work with CEOs, and nobody knows how to behave anymore. I got guys that run companies that won't even have like meetings with females unless the door's open and there's somebody else in the room. Men are on the defense right now. And this is, I'm not saying this by saying men are better than women. I'm saying men are great at things, women are great at things. But I do think toxic masculinity is something that's made up and is a divisive term. You know, it's a divisive classification, and it upsets me to hear it.
I agree.
And I think it's apparent. You know, you got men acting like women and women acting like men. You see it everywhere. You got parents who work for the children. They don't even discipline their own children. They don't teach anything to their own kids. Their kids learn on an iPad or on a phone about life. So I just think we have an issue. We have a people problem.
Yeah. I agree. I think, nailed it. I'm not a big guy with that toxic masculinity crap at all and stuff like that. And I think you're right. I think it's made up, and it's trying to almost bring down the male. You know what I mean? Bring them down, all male, hey, listen, don't be toxic.
Yeah. But in the end, Bricks, what I think it does, I think it actually brings down the women and it brings down the family.
Yeah.
I think, and that's why I'm saying it's the trifecta. I think everybody suffers. Listen, if you're a woman out there and you want to be a CEO, that's great, man. Go do it. I'm rooting for you if that's what you really want to do. But if you feel, I coach women, they feel pressured. They feel like they're underperforming as a woman if they're not doing these things. And that's not the reason to do it. But I also work with some women that are great CEOs and executives. So, but toxic masculinity, I think, is just BS.
Yeah.
And I think there's some, there's a spectrum of men, right? You have men that are tough guys, right? They hunt, they work the land, they're grinders, coal miners, that's that group. And then there's other men that, that function differently. And then there is a softer male that's out there, but that doesn't mean every male should be soft. It's just, this is the spectrum.
Yeah. I agree. Great explanation of that, because I think that's what needs to be heard, what's going on. Mental toughness. What does that mean to you?
Mental toughness to me just means having the ability to endure and the ability to overcome whatever comes your way. Again, I think there's much like, we were talking toxic masculinity. I also think there's the bubble culture that's going on as well, where if we protect you so much, you'll be safe, but you're actually at your highest level of risk because you've never been exposed to anything and you don't develop mental toughness. I don't believe you shoot out of the womb and you have mental toughness. Mental toughness is acquired through each battle that you have, both with yourself, with others, with your boss, with your spouse, with your girlfriend, with your, employer, whatever it may be. You gain mental toughness through obstacles. So if you haven't had any obstacles, you're going to be a pussy. That's what it is. You have to have obstacles in front of you. You have to overcome obstacles in order to be tough. Just like, what we do when we train athletes, right? If we just gave them, light weight all day, they wouldn't have to overcome anything. So therefore they wouldn't develop strength. So we need to progressively overload people, as it relates to obstacles, which is just going out and living life. There'll be plenty of things for you to overcome.
I agree.
And in the end, you'll have a greater level of mental toughness. But, you got all these courses out there where it's like, hey, spend $5,000 and become a Navy SEAL. See what that's like for the weekend. And it's like, you see this fat slob that does nothing, ever. And he goes out there and he blows out his back, but he gets a little badge that says like, I did this Navy SEAL thing for the weekend. Now I'm tough. And it's like, no, you become mentally tough just day in and day out by challenging yourself and pushing up against the resistance that life is going to provide you.
Yeah, I tell the kids, it's almost like calluses on your brain. You get those calluses like you were talking about on your hands and stuff like that.
Yeah, I like that.
In your brain, that mental toughness. You got to be able to take it. You're going to get beaten down. It's how you get back up and continue on. And I think that's what we have to do, every day. Every day can be, is a struggle. Some days better than others, but every day is a struggle. Life's hard. Everybody who tries to make life easy is not doing justice as you get older.
Yeah. And that brings me to something I always say, you got to know the rules of the game in which you play. Who told you life was easy? Who told you you get every job you apply for? Who told you you make every team you try out for? Who told you you're a Division I player when you're really a JUCO guy, or, you don't have the ability to play at that level? Like, who told you this? It's not true. Sometimes we suck at things, and that suck oftentimes motivates us to get better, or it motivates us to quit and do something else.
I agree. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Nothing at all. No, it's great.
Tribulations and move on. But I agree. I think you're right. 100%.
I think if we can get people to embrace themselves more, like who they are, all parts of themselves. Like I said earlier, the full spectrum. I think people will live a better life.
Yes.
I think they'll be happier too. Everyone's searching for happiness. And I always tell them, listen, happiness is inside of you.
Yeah.
Some people say it's a decision. I think it's a decision, but I think there has to be alignment within you in order for you to actually make that decision.
Yeah. I know a lot of people. It's funny because I work with a lot of, I used to do a lot of work down in the city and used to deal with some homeless people. They were some of the happiest people in the world, dude. They had nothing besides what was right there. And they were some of the happiest people. They were content on what they did, They didn't have much. One was an ex-military guy, lost his way a little bit up here. But he was content, happy.
Yeah.
He didn't need anything. He didn't try to be something he wasn't. Now, granted, he probably could have gotten a job and things like that, but he was a happy dude. You talk to him, and he would talk to you for hours and tell you stories and always had a smile on his face. I'm like, damn, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He didn't need any of that stuff. And that gets into my next question here. I said, what do you think drives men of today? When I was growing up, my drive, and probably with you, was that approval from your parents. You know what I mean? As you're younger, you wanted that approval. You wanted, you wanted to be good. But what do you think drives the men of today?
I think in some ways it's still similar, right? But in addition to parents, they're also looking for, to win in the court of public opinion. So they want to say the right thing. They want to do the right thing. Even if those things that they're saying and doing don't align with who they are, they're going to do them anyway because it looks good. It's like how many people start charities that don't even give a shit about the charity in which they're serving or built. They're doing it for, it looks good. Sounds good. It's a good story to tell. And I think that's where most people are today. I think they're looking to please the gram and the Twitter feed, and they're looking to please, people that look, the eyes of the people that look at it. We're in the be cool culture. And listen, I think every generation has to be cool, in their own way. But I have found, man, I was just talking to a baseball player. I said, I'm so proud of you because there's nothing cooler than a guy at 20 years old that knows who he is and what he wants. That's cool. Yeah. And he said, I'm losing a lot of friends, and I don't get the calls I used to get on the weekends. I said, you know what? That's great. I'm happy for you. Don't worry about those calls. You'll get other calls. I was the same way. I was very committed to what I was committed to as a young man. I started with the Yankees at 19 years old, and I wasn't a player. I tried to make it as a player, but I wasn't good enough. But I got there at 19 because I made decisions that my buddies were not making. My buddies, the be coolers, wanted to go drink and, meet chicks and do that whole thing. And I said, man, I got a great opportunity here. I go to school in Tampa. I'm going to intern with the Yankees. I'm going to find a way in. And I did. I started with zero pay. I started at the bottom, handing out waters, handing out towels, cleaning the weight room. But over time, I continued to gain my way, find my way. And I wasn't looking to impress anybody but myself.
Yeah.
So it's not about pleasing the eyes of others. It's not even about pleasing your parents. It's not. And it's not even just about pleasing yourself in a hedonistic way. It's about pleasing yourself by saying, did I do a great job today? And you got to answer yes every time. And if you answer yes, did I give it my all? Did I do my best today? Did I position myself for success, as per my definition? If you answer yes to those things, you had a great day. And that's what I tell people all the time. Use that as your checks and balances. Did I give it my all? Yes. That's an important question to ask. Did I do my best? Yes. At that point, the outcomes are what they are, but you know that you gave your best.
No, I think that's great, with that kind of stuff. Another personal thing. What's one of your biggest failures? Or learning experience, I should say. Failures or learning experiences.
Yeah. Well, I'm again, like I said earlier, I'm not afraid of much, so I'm not afraid of failure. I had these training facilities. I feel like it was a fail at one point because I thought the original fail was because I didn't grow them into being, 250 facilities across America. That's what I thought my original fail was. But the actual fail was I got to a point where I didn't want to do it anymore, and I kept doing it. That was the fail. The fail was I knew in my heart I was out, and I kept doing it anyway. That was the fail. The fail was not listening to my gut and to my instincts, which I've trusted my whole life.
How long
So
did you go on?
What's that?
Felt like, hey, I wanted to get out. How many more years did you go in and stay in the business?
Oh, I probably went another 2 years.
Okay.
Not that people say it was only 2 years, but yeah, that's 2 years of my life. That's 2 years. You know how many minutes that is? You know how many employees and crap I had to listen to in those 2 years? You know how much money I had to lay out per month for 2 years? 40,000 plus a month. Yeah, do the math. That was a lot for 2 years. So it was 2 years too many. And, a lot of it had to do with staying in it because I thought I had to, right? I started to take on the identity of this owner of these training facilities. And I justified it as, I was the Yankees guy. I opened them in New York. It was a give back to the community, and it was a give back, may have been a give back to the community, but it was certainly a take from myself.
In there.
Yeah. So, but eventually it leads you back to what you want to do and what you should be doing.
Yeah, no, you definitely have come back that way. And I think, you might've answered this. So if you did, just let me know, but this is maybe going a little bit of the opposite perspective. What was one of your greatest growths in life? Where did you see one of your biggest growths, as you went along?
Yeah. I never wanted to be, like you said earlier, I don't go around telling people, yeah, I was with the Yankees for, 12 years. I shy away from that, but I got to say, it was one of my most proud moments to prove to myself that, I grew up a kid in New York. I grew up watching players like Derek Jeter, Andy Pettitte, and players like that. I was a big fan of the game, big fan of the team. And, I would go to that stadium as a fan all the time. And then, at 19 years old, I was a fan one day. And the story is I went up to the stadium down in Tampa for spring training, and I had a flip phone, and I'm taking pictures through a chain link fence of all these players that I grew up idolizing. And literally that day I went back to my internship with Ron McKeefrey down at USF. Ronnie was who I worked under when I first got my start. And he says, Dana, can I talk to you? And like where I come from in New York, when somebody says that to you, they're not going to give you good news. So I go into the office and he goes, listen, I got a call from the head strength coach with the Yankees, Jeff Mangold, and he'd like to see if I had anybody that would want to help out. Would you have any interest? And I said, as a matter of fact, I just got back from there. I'd love to do that. When do I start? And he's like, well, you start tomorrow. So the next day I drive up. The day before I parked a mile and a half away because I couldn't afford parking. And then this next day I have a parking spot right up front reserved for me. I walk into the office. They throw a credential around my neck with my name on it. And it had a C in the corner for clubhouse access and an F for field access. And literally like that, I was on the other side of the fence. That same fence I was taking pictures through the day before, I was now staring at it from the other side. And what that taught me was, and this is why I'm most proud of that moment, is because, listen, my parents are both teachers. I had no connections. I wasn't privileged. I didn't grow up with a silver spoon in my mouth. I grew up hearing more about what I couldn't have because, we couldn't afford that set of sneakers, or we couldn't stay in those hotels or do these different things. So I grew up more about what we couldn't have than what I could have. So that's why, again, it was a proud moment because I took a step towards what was a big goal. And I achieved my goal at 22 years old. I became, between 22 and 23, I became the head strength coach of the New York Yankees. And I was telling those players now that I grew up idolizing, what they had to do today in order to get better. Yet they were teaching me so much every day. But that was one of my great moments that I will take with me, to the grave.
No, I think that's phenomenal because something that people don't want to do, and I think you said it early on in that whole thing, is you had to work for nothing. Nothing. Ron McKeefer called you, great guy, who I think's awesome. And he said, hey, you want to go up here? And you had to do all the bull crap, the cow stuff, the wiping down the equipment, the stuff that I tell kids. I said, listen, my first job was a janitor. After Paperboy, I delivered papers, and then I became a janitor. I cleaned toilets. And they're like, you did what? And I'm like, yeah, dude, I had to get a job to pay money to take care of myself and all this kind of stuff. And they're like, you did what? And people look at that like that's almost like a bad thing. But you mentioned it right there. That gave you your big break, or one of your breaks, to go and work with a team that you really wanted to work with. And then that grew you from there into your facilities. And then from there, now you're doing your books and coaching and all that other kind of stuff. If you don't take that bullcrap job, maybe things would be totally different.
Yeah, it's true. I go into almost everything from the mindset of bottom up. Like, I don't believe I deserve a spot at the top if I don't do the work at the bottom. Like even now, we started off earlier, my wife and we bought a cattle farm, and I'll admit, I don't know a ton about cattle, but I'm going to figure it out. And, even yesterday before I was coaching an athlete, I'm in the barn, I'm shoveling, cow shit, and hay. And I'm talking to a young man who's 23 years old that's telling me how, about his ideal job that he wants, but he's not willing to work at the bottom. And I said, hey, I had my ideal job. Look what I'm doing right now. So we should always do those things at the bottom if we want the rewards of the top. And I tell you what, in what I do, I've been to the top. It's cool. But I like the bottom too. Like, I like the work. I like the sweat. I like, being able to hang with the millies and the billies in terms of, income. And I enjoy hanging with the guys that work at cattle auctions and work the land and, are in the work boots, and grinding on the side of the road. I like those people. I like all those people.
And I think that's key.
Yeah.
You have to put in the work. It's just not going to be handed to you. I know society tries to tell you that don't settle for this. You're right, but also you got to put the work in getting to that point. I like being in the trenches most of the time. Actually, I'd rather do that than a lot of the other crap, as you probably did too.
Yeah.
All the other headaches. Because when you're at the top, a lot of times, that's where all the headaches are. Because everybody's telling you all their problems. You got to deal with all that. When you're at the bottom, dude, just go out and do your thing and get your job done.
Yeah, you get your job done. And I see guys at the top, and I think the one thing that leads to a lot of their stress and mental distress is that they don't do anything anymore. They're like, they're not actually playing the instruments in the orchestra. They're just conducting it. And I think that a lot of those guys enjoyed playing the instruments, but they don't do it anymore because they're more valuable as a conductor, but they miss a piece of life. So, you got to jump in the trenches, and that doesn't mean, you're going to be there forever. It means when you understand what happens at the bottom, you could lead well at the top. It's the only way you could lead at the top. And, if you see a leader, that really isn't a leader, but if you see somebody that's at the top and never did what was at the bottom, they can't be good. There's going to be a communication and most importantly, an understanding gap that exists. That person will never understand what happens at the bottom. They've never been there. That's why second generation wealth is the worst to work for, because their dad or mother built a fortune and it was their job just to not lose it.
No, I agree. And I think that's key, what you said. You said great leaders learn from that bottom part and then they build themselves up. You know what I mean? So they know the process to get to there. They just weren't handed that job or fell into that job. I'm not saying you can't be a good leader there. I'm not saying that. But the majority of great leaders that I know all came from the bottom. Yeah. They were all here, did the crap jobs, did the garbage jobs, and they worked themselves up. Yeah. Understood what these guys at the bottom are going to. And I think there was a show, if I'm not mistaken. Wasn't it like Undercover Boss or something?
Yeah, yeah.
The boss would have to go down and do all the things, and you didn't even know he was the boss. And I think it was a great show because it showed leadership of, hey, I can go down and do this. You know what I mean? And hopefully that you never lose that touch, because that's what made who you are to where you got to. And I think your sentiment right there with that whole Yankee story, taking those pictures and then finally getting your big break and then boom, running with it from there is key.
Bricks, I can't tell you, just in my own mind, I remember all these times that I would call my folks and I would bitch to them about how much I hate what I'm doing right now. I hate this. I hate the drive. When I first started with the Yankees, I was driving 90 minutes each way to the stadium because I couldn't afford. I'm working with the Yankees. I couldn't afford to have an apartment. I couldn't afford it. I was working with the New York Yankees, working with guys that were worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And I was living with my parents. And I was driving 90 minutes each way. You know how tired you are after a game at midnight when you got there at 12:30 and you left your parents' house? You leave your parents' house at 11. You drive 90 minutes. You're there for 12:30. The game is over between 11 and midnight, and you're driving home after working your nuts off all day, 90 minutes. I mean, there's a traffic light near my parents' house. I'll tell my wife, I'm like, do you know how many times I've fallen asleep at this light? And that's the truth. Or when we fly in from the West Coast and the plane touches down at Newark at 5 a.m. and 30 minutes to the stadium, and one direction everybody's driving to work, and I'm driving home to my parents' house 90 minutes after flying in from LA with the New York Yankees. So I'm saying that like that because I mean, I'm with rock stars, and I'm going home to my childhood bedroom. Okay. So, and it wasn't because I didn't have it together. It's because I couldn't afford it. And that was the reality. So, that's what it is. Like, life is about climbing the steps, and you got to realize that there's points in your life where you are on the ramen noodle diet and you're eating, I remember this, you'll appreciate this. When I was with the Yanks, when I first started out, I wasn't paid to work spring training. So what I used to do was I used to go to college. I had a part-time job as the guy on the back of the tram at Busch Gardens in Tampa Bay. Okay. And I used to take as my compensation Metrex packets from Yankee State, from the spring training facility, and yogurt and some waters. so I could have meals that were powder because I was making $7 an hour at Busch Gardens. And sort of this whole moment of where it all came together, there was a pitcher by the name of John Lieber. He pitched for the Phillies, and he was with us with the Yankees. So in the morning, here I am working with the Yanks. I'd go to school in the afternoon, and then I'd go work at Busch Gardens. And we had an off day from the Yanks one day. So I took a morning shift at Busch Gardens. And here I am on the back of the tram with my yellow top on that said traffic. I was in the traffic department. And I'm leaning up against the back, doing my spiel. Welcome to Busch Gardens. Over there's this roller coaster, blah, blah, blah. And this guy turns around in the second to last row and he goes, "What the fuck are you doing back there?" and it was John Lieber. He had no idea that what I had to do to make it work.
Yeah.
So here's a big league pitcher that's made 50 million plus in his career. And he can't believe I'm back there. He can't believe it. So that was when the whole thing came full circle. And it's like, guys, gals, on this show, guys specifically, don't be afraid to start at the bottom and like take pride in all those steps that suck along the way. All those places I complained about. If you do it right, they'll get you to where you're supposed to go.
I agree. That's an awesome story, dude. Awesome. Love that. I love that, man. But that just shows that story. That's, climbing that ladder, like you said, climbing the stairs. And it's key.
Yeah.
I love it. Last question for you.
Yeah.
I need your 3 characteristics of what you feel a real man is.
Huh. Well, I'm going to say guts, nuts, and instinct. You got to have courage, which is the guts. You have to have the nuts to take the risk and put yourself out there. And you have to have the instincts to know that you're going the right way.
Yeah, definitely got to have that, that courage. I think that's key for any male out there. You got to have courage to do what you got to do to take those risks. You took a risk. Your job with the Yankees was a risk. Yeah. It might not have panned out when you first took it, and you would you have been lost? No, because you learned something, but you took that risk knowing like, all right, I got to do this in the morning. I got school in the afternoon. I got to go work a $7 an hour job. Imagine that. Kids complain about, not making $15. You were making $7. I remember $3.50 or something. But, that you had to do that. You took that risk knowing that, hey, there's a good chance that this is going to pay off. It might not pay off now because everybody wants instant gratification, but it's going to pay off at some point. And you had the courage to take that, where a lot of people have been like, well, how much are you going to pay me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah. But listen, I should say this, like, trust me, I'm a capitalist. I love the opportunity that we have in this country to do certain gigs. Like, I get to coach and make a living. I love it. I get to coach and thrive. Let me say that. Right. And we have a tremendous opportunity, but I grew up, my father, you said the word gratification, instant. I grew up in a house where my dad pounded it into my brain. Delayed gratification, he told me, delayed gratification. And the other thing he told me was this. I remember driving home from baseball games and sporting events, and I would tell my dad what I was going to do. And he would look at me and he'd say this. He'd say, "Don't tell me, show me." And then he would say, "And if you're really that good, you don't have to talk. People will talk for you." So I grew up delayed gratification. Don't tell me, show me. And I grew up with, if you're that good, people will talk for you. So if you find somebody with a big mouth, they're probably not that good.
Yeah.
So, coming full circle to how we started, like, there's a reason I don't talk a lot about what I've done, because people find out what you've done, just based on you continuing to do. Yeah. And that's it. And I don't want to be known forever as a Yankee guy. Like, I have more talents than that. I'm a cattleman now. and I'm a coach, you know, and I'm a, you know, so, but in all seriousness, it's all of those things. But I appreciate this show because it's something that's aggravated me lately, is that men are acting like boys, and men are falling victim to whatever's going on out there. I don't know exactly what to call it, you know, but men need to step up and challenge themselves, and they can't feel like they have to please everybody. You know, women have that characteristic more so. Typically, you'll find women are more in the business of pleasing. You know, that's a female trait. And now I'm seeing a lot more men take that on. I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to do the wrong thing. I don't want to offend anybody. And you know what? Sometimes you're going to offend people. But if you're true to yourself and you're true to your character and somebody's offended by that, keep moving. They're going to move right out of your way, and you're going to keep moving towards where you have to go. I know people don't like my tone sometimes. They don't like the way I say things. They don't like my accent. They don't like certain things, but I don't give a shit. I don't. And it's not that I don't care about people. I love people. I help people every day. And that's my great compass. As long as my compass is pointed in the direction of helping people every day, I don't really care what anybody else thinks.
No, I think that's phenomenal advice for all males out there. You know what I mean? You got to stand up for what you believe. You know, you got to have your principles and your values set. And like you said, your job is to help other people, and that's what you believe and that's what you want to do. And you don't care about the other outside influences. Go do it, man.
You can't. I mean, you got just, you know, you have your family that you have to focus on. You know, you have your health you got to focus on. You got everything else in between that you need to focus on. You know, there's going to be critics out there.
Yep.
It's okay. It's not a problem. You know, we have to help people find their way. And for anybody listening to this, I always like to give something practical too. You know, if you don't know who you are, write down some characteristic traits that you have and characteristic traits you'd like to have. And it's your job to, I call that closing the gap. Close the gap on those. What you don't have, close the gap so you do.
Yeah.
Who you want to, you could always become who you want to become. Don't live by default.
I agree. Coach,
cool.
I greatly appreciate it, man. I know you're a busy guy. I appreciate you taking time out, working on the cattle range now.
Yeah.
I love to hear that. I love when people go in a whole different direction. You're like, really? That's what he's doing now? You know what I mean? Because it's like different, which I think is great. You know, you're trying something new. You want it. You know, you have passion for it. And that's what it's about. So I wish you all the best with that. I wish you the best with coaching. I'm looking forward to catching up with you here, hopefully in the springtime when all this virus crap calms down a little bit. And we just catch up. And then I'll have you on, like I said, off air, I talked about it, but I want to have you on some roundtables where you're sitting in, you know, we'll do it online, and you're in with a bunch of guys, and we're just answering questions, and we're just talking.
Yeah.
That happens with guys, you know, stuff that happens and you have to go through. And some of these stories that you talked about are some of the things that, you know, guys got to be able to come through and do.
Totally.
So I definitely want you on. I definitely appreciate you taking the time out of your day and doing all this great stuff.
Cool. I'm happy to be there.
All right, my man. You have yourself a great one, Coach.
All right, Bricks. You too, man.